Today, I met with Kyle Melko, an insurance broker with Acumen Insurance. He is somebody that's worked with a lot of rock stars in general, and by rock stars, I mean like people that work with our brokerage. He does a lot of student rental properties, and he's a specialist specifically with investors. So that's why it was somebody that I decided to have on the show. You'll see that there is actually quite a few little things to pay attention to when you're getting quoted for your property insurance. These are some of the things that we discussed, some things like sewer backup, vandalism, things that your tenants might do to the house. So like different companies will offer different options there in that situation. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys got the most out of property insurance. Hopefully you'll enjoy. And reminder, if you know someone looking to invest in their first, second, or third property, I would love to help them out. It would be my pleasure to take care of your referrals. So keep me in mind. You can look for me on welloff.ca or george@welloff.ca. And I look forward to helping your family and friends. Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. Today, I'm here with Kyle Melko, who is a commercial account executive, works with Acumen Insurance Group. And what they do as a company, they offer specialized and affordable insurance solutions for building owners, property managers, and a big focus when they started was student rental properties, and now they work with all sorts of investment properties. They are specialists in that field. He joined in 2015, and he actually designed a program specifically for student rentals at the time. He's also a member of the Hamilton District Apartment Association, and Acumen is actually a full-service brokerage, which is interesting because I know in real estate we discuss those terms, and I wanted to start off by asking you what that means as an insurance brokerage to provide full service.
Yeah, so basically we've been around for about 40 years. There's 30 to 40 employees in our Hamilton office. Everyone kind of does their own thing. They have their own specialty. Myself and a couple people on my team, we do the real estate, student rentals, things like that. But we also do your standard home and auto insurance, commercial insurance, life insurance, financial services, everything like that as well. So
cool. Okay, so that's what you mean by full service.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming today. I wanted to do the usual. So you said you've heard some of the episodes, and you know that I start off by asking about your childhood.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about where you grew up and what that was like for you?
Sure. So my parents split up when I was very young. So I kind of split my time between the Rosedale area in Hamilton, as well as out in Binbrook and Stony Creek a bit. So grew up on the Hamilton Mountain, out in Binbrook a bit, played my sports out in Binbrook, and then also spent some time down with my dad down in Rosedale. So it was a nice balance of kind of the whole city.
Cool. What sports were you into?
Played some hockey growing up, as well as some baseball, and golf, big golf person.
Cool. Do you still play?
Still play. It's nice having the ability to play, especially getting into insurance. So it's nice to get out and golf with some clients or some charity tournaments and things like that.
Cool. Do you play the other sports as well?
Still play hockey once a week. Try not to hurt myself when I'm out there. And up until recently played softball as well, just with some family and friends.
Okay, cool. That's great. Okay, so you grew up split a little bit between the mountain and Binbrook.
Right.
And where do you currently live?
I live out in Mount Hope. Me and my wife and my daughter are out there, and been there for many years now.
All right, good for you. How'd you meet your wife?
I actually met my wife. I worked at one of my first part-time jobs was working at the arena, and she also worked there, so we crossed paths that way. I kind of knew her family a bit. Played hockey with her brother, and it's been 13 years now. So
cool. So when you say arena, the hockey arena?
Yeah, at the hockey arena out in Glanbrook there, so Glanbrook Arena.
Okay, good for you.
Yeah.
So you've been married how long now?
I've been married for 5 years, 5 years last month. And we have our daughter now. She's 10 months old. And
congrats.
So, it's fun and exciting times.
Good. All sorts of good things are happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me, how did you think about, were you always kind of interested in rental properties, or how did you stumble upon this insurance sort of field and career?
Yeah, so I actually went to school for insurance at Mohawk College. They have a 2-year program there. And basically it's all the education you can get when you start your career, but you can do that before you start your career. So I think it's 10 or 12 classes on various courses, no different than what you guys have in real estate,
Mm-hmm.
the different courses to get some certifications and things like that. So I did that for 2 years. Got interested in that about grade 10 or 11. Had a family friend who was in insurance, and I wasn't sure. I knew I wanted to get into the business world, and insurance seemed to be very specific, which I liked.
Mm-hmm.
And the program at Mohawk actually has a 100% employment rate, so I knew I'd be guaranteed a job when I got out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, kind of looked into a few different careers. Found the broker world, liked the kind of lifestyle it allowed for. If you can be disciplined and stick to what you need to do, no different than in the real estate world. It gives you the flexibility to also do some things. You're not tied to your desk 9 to 5. You can be out seeing clients and
Mm-hmm.
doing different things and kind of build your own business. So.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so you went to Mohawk College to get your degree, but what about someone? Do you have to have some sort of degree to get into insurance? Or
I
can
have my
anyone-
broker's license, so you have to pass a broker's exam.
Yeah, so but
Um,
anyone can take that exam, I guess.
Yeah,
you
you can-
don't need to have a degree from a college or university, do you?
No, the majority of people in the insurance world, typically they have some sort of business degree,
Yeah.
or they come from some sort of field like that. You find in the Hamilton area, anyways, that a lot of people have done the program just
Mhm.
because it's offered at the local college. But you don't. It's not a prerequisite to get into the insurance world. Same as real estate. Anyone can go and write their real estate license. There's no, I guess, formal real estate degree,
Mm-hmm.
right? But one thing leads to another, and I stuck with it and have a diploma in insurance. Have my Canadian accredited insurance brokers designation as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, was there any sort of advantage to getting your degree from Mohawk?
It basically gives you a little bit more ground when you're looking for a job. You have kind of that special education, especially getting into the broker world. Not a lot of places are willing to take a risk on someone that has no insurance background and they want to go out and start selling insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the advantage that it gave me. It gave me the a bit of an insurance background,
Mm-hmm.
and also prepared me to write the broker's exam.
Okay. Do insurance brokers get paid a salary, or is it purely commission based?
It's a mix of both.
Yeah.
So there are salaried brokers out there. Myself, I work on a commission basis, and there's pros and cons to both. The salary gives you a little more stability. Typically, there's not as much upside to increase your income.
Mm-hmm.
They have their sales expectations for the year and probably some service expectations as well. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So tell me, when you first got your insurance license, I guess, how did you go about finding clients?
So how I started was basically doing home and auto insurance. It's typically where a lot of young brokers start because it's fairly easy to get your feet wet doing that. And then from there, I knew that I wanted to expand into the commercial side, but can be a little overwhelming at the beginning. So I decided, well, I know how property insurance works. And going to Mohawk College, I had some friends that were living in student houses, and that kind of intrigued me as to, well, who does the insurance for this? Because your standard homeowners insurance market won't cover student rentals,
Mhm.
student occupancy. So one thing led to another, and how I initially started was going on all the schools' websites. They had all their listings for their student rentals, and just reaching out that way to people and saying, hey, I'm starting to specialize in student rentals, and we have some great rates and good coverage and things like that. And that got me started, as well as actually Paul DeBruzzo was, I believe it was his first rental property, and it was one of my first student rental policies. We connected out of the blue. This is about 10 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
And I did a policy up for him, and that went well. And from there, I kind of got some confidence going, and he connected me to a few other investors and things like that. And I left the industry for a bit, a couple of years. Not the industry, I left the broker side for a couple of years. And then when I came back, we reconnected, and from there, it's snowballed from there. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. Paul's an agent in my office at Rockstar Real Estate. He's
Right.
Everyone at Rockstar is pretty much, we're all investors and work with investors. So that's cool that you got started 10 years ago. And what did you do when you took your break?
So I actually went to work for a sports insurance company. as an underwriter. So for 3 years, we handled a lot of the national sports associations, a lot of the Olympic athletes, all amateurs. I didn't know professional athletes or anything like that, but all amateur athletes, anyone from your local curling club all the way up to National Rowing Association, things like that. So
what is that? What do you do? Like, do you insure the athletes themselves?
yeah, so we're covering the liability of the association as well as the athletes from an injury standpoint, things like that.
So to replace their income if they get injured or something like that?
Well, you don't see a lot of income typically on the amateur athlete side.
Yeah.
But what you see is just they need the physio, the rehabilitation to get back to being an athlete. So a lot of them sacrifice their time and, they're working up to the Olympics or World Championships. So they need to be able to train and compete for those things.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. And you come back, you decide once again to specialize with investors. And at this point, I know you've told me a little bit about what kind of properties you work on, but you'll do pretty much anything that investors own, right?
Yeah. So what we've seen popular lately is a lot of the legal second suite stuff. So we have a nice solution for that. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing a lot of creative stuff as the market gets harder and harder to invest in, and investors and real estate agents need to get a little creative to make things work financially. We're evolving as well to come up with solutions for that, as well as your standard policy for things like student rentals, investment properties, apartment buildings.
Okay. Yeah, you talked about how you specialized in student rentals when you first started.
Right.
How is a student rental policy different from another rental policy for like a single family home, for example?
Yeah, so most standard insurance markets that do rental properties, they don't like when there's unrelated individuals sharing common areas, things like that, as well as higher occupancy volumes for houses. So, and typically in our world, when insurance companies don't understand something, they just don't want, they're not interested in it. So what it takes, just like any industry, is someone to specialize it, take the time to understand it, find out the information they need to know, and develop policies and programs to handle these special types of risks.
Mm-hmm. You on your website, it shows that you designed a program for student rental properties. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so we started off with a few, and we got some traction with that. And from there, we were able to kind of develop a package that covers any of the big concerns, as well as some smaller things that what I don't see with other student rental insurance markets. Things like allowing for extended vacancies during the summer months and things like that. So basically, just like any other industry, when you specialize in something, you tend to pay more attention to the smaller details and allow yourself the ability to kind of develop better products for customers. Every broker has access to student rental insurance coverage. But what I find is they either take a long time to get back to people, or the policies aren't as great as what you could be getting somewhere else. So when I started specializing in it, I found that I could offer efficient response times, as well as great coverage. So it's a good solution, and it's a win-win on both sides.
Okay. Yeah, so like you said, every brokerage pretty much has access to student rentals, but a lot of people just don't understand, or a lot of insurance brokers don't understand the coverage. Just like, for example, in real estate, your typical realtor may not truly understand an investment property.
Exactly.
Right? So it's kind of the same sort of thing. So you're specialized in that area. Can you tell me some of the things that we should be looking out for? Let's say somebody is interested in buying a student rental.
Right.
What are some of the things from an insurance standpoint that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so the biggest things that I would say you need to pay attention to are water damage limits, sewer backup limits, rental income limits, any exclusions in regards to vacancy permissions, things like that. So in regards to vacancy permissions, your typical policy, rental property policy, will allow for usually 30 days vacancy. They understand from time to time you're going to have some challenges trying to find a tenant. There's going to be, a few weeks here and there where the property is empty, whether you're doing some small renovations between tenants, things like that, where we have a solution where the policy will allow 120 days, understanding that school ends in April or May. Students may not be in there till September. The coverage is a little more limited during that time, but you still have the policy's not going to deny a claim and with respect to no one being there for 30, 60, 90, 120, up to 120 days. So the biggest thing that I see nowadays is in regards to water damage and sewer backup. So what I see is a lot of clients as well as brokers don't understand the amount that a claim may go to in regards to water damage. So I see policies that have $15,000 sewer backup when we're seeing sewer backup or water damage claims in the $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 range.
Can you speak to that a little bit and explain what you're like specifically when it comes to sewer backup, how it could damage a property and whatnot? Yeah.
So the most common claims we see are water damage. So a burst pipe is the most common, or sewer backup. So whether this typically, students aren't maybe as keen on making sure drains are flowing properly, or there's an influx of use on the showers, just the infrastructure in the house in general. So when something like that goes wrong, typically it goes wrong pretty quick, and water is going to get into every area it can as quick as possible. So what we recommend to all of our clients are things like backflow valves, having the drains inspected regularly, and just taking a proactive approach to it. Because obviously you have insurance, but it can cause quite a nightmare when you're trying to relocate multiple students, or if it's during the school year, if it's in the winter. It just causes a nightmare for the landlords or property managers. So we always recommend to our clients to kind of take a proactive approach. Spending $150 or $200 to get your drains scoped, or even just using a drain cleaner to make sure the drains are flowing regularly, or even just educating your tenants a bit, especially the students, and saying, hey, let's make sure that we're not putting stuff down the drains. Let's make sure if there's any issues, if you encounter a change in water pressure, things like that, those are indicators that there might be an issue with the water lines. And if you can address those issues quickly, typically the sooner the better in regards to avoiding something massive like a basement flooding or things like that.
Right. And from my understanding, I might be wrong here, but I remember hearing this somewhere that basically if there is like heavy rains for whatever reason and the city sewers are really full, then in that case, some of that water might come back into your house.
Absolutely.
And that's where you might have some flooding in your basement potentially.
Yeah. So what we see, and especially in a lot of the cities that have post-secondary facilities, Waterloo, Hamilton, the infrastructure in these cities is getting extremely old, and it doesn't handle the influx of rain or water from the weather events that we're seeing the last few years. So that water goes somewhere, and typically what it does is it backflows back into these houses. In that case, from an insurance standpoint, that's a sewer backup loss. Yeah. And personally myself, I try not to sell a policy with less than a $50,000 limit, because
and it doesn't make that much of a difference on your policy, right?
No, I think the cost for that is about $50 a year.
Yeah.
So even if you want to bump that up, or if you're trying to save money, that's not the area where I would try to save money on a policy.
Right.
That's, like I said, probably the most common claims we see nowadays: sewer backup or water damage.
Right. And then, so what you're saying is that if, let's say you have, I don't know, carpeting for whatever reason, and or laminate floors in a basement,
right?
And then now that flood water comes in, it's going to destroy the floors. It's probably going to destroy whatever else is down there, like your bathroom cabinets, and if you have a kitchen, whatever. So that's why you're saying that $15,000 may not be enough to rebuild or restore some of these items.
Exactly. So what we use as a general guide, and this has been provided by many of our insurance companies, is about $25 a square foot for a finished basement, and $5 a square foot for unfinished basement, because once the water gets down, they're going to go 2 feet up the drywall to replace it. But what we're seeing is to maximize the the value of these properties is the basements are finished now.
Yeah.
There's bathrooms down there. There's typically even kitchens. It's a fully furnished area. So you're looking at least in the range of $25 a square foot. So if you're trying to do some quick math to see if you have a sufficient sewer backup limit, I would use a value of $25 a square foot. So some of these houses you're easily at maybe 8 to 1,000 square feet in the basement. So right there you're at 25,000 if you were to have kind of a total loss in the basement.
Yeah, so that formula only applies to the square footage of the basement.
Yeah, for the
whole
basement.
house.
Yeah.
Okay.
So generally for a house, you need to be at least $200 a square foot. The national building average, the last time I checked, is about $175. I think that's a little low because you also need to account for things like debris removal, professional fees. There might be some bylaws that come into play. There's coverage for that as well, especially on the older homes in regards to how they can be rebuilt and things like that.
Yeah, when you get an insurance quote, it's like 10 pages of all sorts of stuff.
Right.
What are some of the things to look out for other than the sewer backup?
Sure. So the easiest way to assess a policy is probably to go to the exclusions. That's where I like to I know a good policy is going to say we're going to cover everything unless it's excluded. That's the easiest way to look at an average insurance policy. So what I like to do, especially up front, especially when I send quotes to people, is kind of go over, okay, what's not covered? And is this a concern for you? And is there a solution to have that covered? Or how can we mitigate that away from that being a huge financial loss out of your pocket? So things like the sewer backup typically has a little bit of a higher deductible because we see a lot of those claims. So that could be the difference. Yeah, so you could be saving $150 compared to someone else's quote, but their sewer backup deductible might be $5,000. So now in the event of a claim, there's $2,500 more or $4,000 more that you might have to pay out of pocket. But beyond that, your student rentals industry standard is typically to exclude cooking in rooms. So they want to see the cooking being done in a equipped area, the kitchen. They don't want to see hot plates in rooms, things like that. Seepage and leakage is another big one. The industry is evolving, and we are starting to see that covered, but it is something to be aware of. So especially if you get into an older home, you may not be fully aware if there might be a crack in the foundation or some areas that leak. Typically that is excluded on rental properties or student rentals as well. So something to be aware of, something to inquire with your broker as to whether seepage and leakage is covered, because that can be pretty drastic damage to a basement that's finished as well.
Okay, so can you tell me about that? Let's say you have a rental property and there's some water coming in.
Right.
It's not major, but it comes in through the foundation.
Right.
And you have that coverage. What would the insurance provider do for you?
Yeah, so it just responds like a normal policy, no different than having like a fire claim or a water damage claim.
So they might fill the crack in the foundation or something. It's not like they're gonna waterproof your basement.
No, and that's the biggest thing. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have with insurance is, not to get off track, but say a roof claim. People have a few shingles fall off their roof and they expect their whole roof to be replaced, as opposed to what was only the damaged area. So basically, the principle behind insurance is that they're going to return you to the same place you were before the claim. So, or help you prevent or repair what's causing that issue.
Okay.
But typically, it has to be something that's sudden and accidental. Doesn't cover wear and tear or maintenance on properties. So
yeah, I see.
that's the easiest way to look at it. You need something sudden and accidental has to happen to cause a loss. And then typically your policy would respond to that.
Is it worth even making claims for small things like a few shingles on the roof or like a small crack in the I'm not talking about a major crack, but something small where they might just inject it? Or because first of all there's the deductible, and then also I think after a certain number of claims you like pretty much get blacklisted from the insurance company, right?
So you definitely want to avoid any small claims if it's possible for you to absorb that loss yourself. One claim is typically not a big deal, but if you get into multiple claims in a, say, 3 to 5 year window, it's going to be more challenging and more costly for you to obtain insurance.
Yeah.
So, if you always want to, and that's why it's best to always deal with a broker. who can give you that advice. So you always want to take into consideration your deductibles. Maybe if you've had a claim in the past, or what the case may be in regards to that. So if it's going to be $1,500 to fix your roof and you have $1,000 deductible, to me it's not worth to risk that you might have a more substantial claim in regards to maybe a sewer backup or water damage, or maybe a massive roof damage in the future. It might be worth your while just to pay the additional $500 out of your pocket.
Yeah, so really what your insurance is there for is for anything major. So maybe, do you ever recommend to people to, like, I don't know, have higher deductibles on the smaller things, like a minor or a few shingles flying off? I don't know if that you can customize your policy like that, or.
So the conversation I always have with my clients is, especially for the new investors, is what's kind of your threshold in the event of a claim. So sometimes you have investors that are very handy themselves. So they say, hey, you know what, I'm comfortable with maybe a $2,500 or $5,000 deductible because myself or my husband is very handy. He could do a bit of drywall work himself. He could go up on the roof and fix a few shingles. But if you're more of the hands-off investor, where, myself especially, I'll be the first one to admit I don't know anything. I'm not very handy at all, right? So if I was an investor, I might be putting in a smaller claim as opposed to someone who's handy, because I don't know how to fix some drywall. I don't know how to patch a foundation or fix a roof. So I always try to ask them what's their threshold. Typically, the new investors starting out, you're on a tighter budget. You don't have any capital built up, or maybe like a little nest on the side to account for that stuff. So you want maybe a lower deductible. You always want to weigh your options in regards to what's the savings if I increase my deductible. So if you can save 10 or 15% by increasing your deductible $1,500 or $1,000, it might make sense, because that savings would add up quicker than what you'd pay in an additional deductible, if that makes sense. So
Right. Yeah. Okay. So slightly different here, but I know that for car insurance, for example,
right.
there are certain discounts that could apply if you're a member of this, or you have, I don't know, like I forget what the.
Yeah, there's like alumni discounts,
yeah, exactly.
And if you belong to certain associations.
Yes.
So on the rental property side, there's not much like that. Typically what we have is more of programs. So preferred pricing just for anyone who has a student rental or rental property. There's no, in our office anyways, there's no specific discount for alumni. There is things like that with places like TD. Sometimes they have a lot of alumni discounts.
Yeah, but usually someone at TD won't really understand all the things that a specialist broker would understand.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's something you have to take into consideration. Is that, yes, there might be some savings, or there might be a discount, but what other value added services are you getting from that?
Yeah, and you have to wait on hold for like 2 hours anytime you want to speak to.
Yeah,
to someone.
And typically you're going to get someone different every time. You might have to explain your situation every time, and you don't develop that relationship with the person.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. For my first rental, I had RBC insurance because I think I was saving like, I don't know, $600 on the year with them for whatever reason.
Right.
But it was such a bad experience. Not to say anything bad about RBC,
sure,
but
absolutely.
just the fact that I had to wait on hold for so long to speak to someone every single time I had a question.
Right.
And like you said, it's someone different, so they're always looking at the notes of what happened. But with a broker, they know who you are. You have a different sort of relationship. You can reach out to them anytime, and you're going to get much faster response. It's more convenient. And they'll work on your behalf to get you a policy that works well for you.
Yeah, so there's a couple advantages dealing with a broker, myself or a broker in general, is that all my clients have my cell phone number. So if you have a claim or question in the evening, weekends, I have no problem taking a call or getting back to you, typically within a couple hours.
Yeah.
If it's in the evening or off business hours. And the other advantage is you develop that relationship. And as brokers, basically our mandate is when we're dealing with the insurance company, we're working on the client's behalf. And when the insurance company is giving us information, we're kind of the middleman between the client and the insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
So you always kind of have that extra person on your side to kind of guide you through the claims process.
Yep.
A lot of my clients have said that that's something they like, is in the event of a claim, kind of going to bat for them
Mm-hmm.
and maybe clarifying some information or just helping them, whether it's with the restoration company and adjuster,
Mm-hmm.
if they're not getting the answers they like. So
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to vacancies or property damage, I'm not talking about necessarily a student rental, but just a rental property in general. Are there any policies that cover those things? Like, let's say a tenant just leaves overnight without warning, without anything, and now the house is vacant,
Right.
or if they damage the property.
Yeah, so on our student rentals and most of our rental properties, there is an endorsement that includes vandalism by tenants. Typically, there's a small charge for it, but
Can you give me an idea of what charge?
yeah.
sort
So
of?
typically, you're looking at about $125 a year
Oh, okay.
for $25,000 limit,
Okay.
and that's going to cover any vandalism by tenants. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't see a lot of those claims, especially properties are so, for the most part, well managed now. They're monitored.
Yeah.
So I guess it used to be an issue years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but now properties are much better managed than they were in the
Yeah,
past.
I
So.
guess that could be useful to someone who's taking on a property that's already tenanted.
Right.
It might be a little more beneficial for that purpose.
Yeah, so you never know how tenants are going to react or
Mhm.
what they're going to do. They can be unpredictable from time to time, as we've seen in the
Yeah.
industry. So it just gives you that cushion. Myself, quick math, $125 to potentially get paid $25,000 for
Mhm.
damage.
Yeah, it's only like $12 a month or just over.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
$10 a month, right?
Yeah, $10 a month. Sorry.
Yeah, so to me that makes sense,
Mhm.
especially when it could be excluded and you could be $25,000 out of pocket,
Mhm.
which could be crippling to your investment
Right.
potentially. So
Okay, and what about vacancy?
vacancy, that's something to always kind of have that conversation with your broker, because each policy can be different as to what they allow
Yeah.
for vacancies.
I'm not talking about like if you're going to have continued coverage during a vacancy.
Yeah.
But I'm saying income replacement during vacancy.
Yeah, so typically if there's a lease agreement in place, that's your biggest friend in the event of a claim,
Mhm.
is showing that either I couldn't collect this rent during that time because the tenant had to move out,
Mhm.
or proving that you had rental income that you were losing during that period. So lease agreements are always very good
Mhm.
to have in regards to proving your rental income.
Okay, so but that is an option to be added potentially to an insurance policy?
Yeah, any rental property policy, sometimes they have it built in, sometimes you have to add it,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't seen one that doesn't cover that,
Okay.
and that coverage is a few dollars a month. So it's worth having on there.
Yeah, it's a few dollars, but does it cover your full rental income?
So typically in the event of a claim, you just have to prove what your rental income was during that time. So
Mhm.
it just goes back to the lease agreement and showing that.
Yep.
So typically they'll cover, and if you don't have a lease agreement in place, most policies will cover just your fair rental value of that property.
Okay.
So they'll kind of use like a general value from that area, or it's typically just a negotiation that goes
Mhm.
on with the adjuster to prove, they're not going to pay you $10,000.
Yeah, for sure.
If the area is only getting $1,000 a month or $1,500
Okay.
a month.
So let's say there's property A which is rented for $1,000 a month,
Right.
and all of a sudden the tenants are late, and now you're taking them to court to get them out. They haven't paid. It's been 2 months or whatnot, and you have to follow procedures. So for those 2 months, that $2,000 that you were supposed to get, the insurance company would potentially cover that if you have it.
No, they'll only cover your rental income if there's an insured loss. So rents in arrears or tenants in arrears, things like that, those things aren't covered under an insurance policy.
They're not covered.
They're not covered because
Okay.
there has to be, goes back to the sudden and accidental occurrence. So say, for example, there's a fire in your house
Mhm.
and the insurance company says it's going to take us 6 months to rebuild this house.
Yeah.
So the tenant has to move out. Obviously, you can't collect the rent during
Mhm.
that 6 months. So they'll reimburse you the rental income that you'd
Got it.
be receiving. So
Yes.
your rental income is coming in as you planned. And one other thing I want to touch on there, the importance of making sure your tenants have tenants insurance is if they have to move out during that 6 months, your policy is not going to cover their additional living expenses. So anything beyond what they're paying in rent. So typically they might have to go to a hotel or somewhere where the rent is higher. Their tenant's policy would respond to cover that, but not your policy. So where we find where it gets a little tense between landlords and tenants is, the landlord recommends that they have tenant insurance. They don't take it. Something happens where they need to move out for even something as simple as 2 weeks. And they're going, well, it's going to cost me an extra $1,000 to live in a hotel. Are you going to pay for that? And they're coming back to the landlords are coming back to us and saying, is this covered? And it's not.
Right.
Typically we have that conversation with people, but it's something that, there's always so much going on when you're writing a policy. They tend to forget that. So it's something lately that we've been making a really big push for, is make sure your tenants have tenants insurance.
Let's say they do have it and they've had it for a year, and then later on they decide, okay, I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
And they cancel the policy. What would you suggest doing in that case?
So it's always best, usually on an annual basis, just to get them to provide you proof of insurance.
Okay.
There's very little you can do to kind of beyond getting them to prove it every month, which becomes a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, but what if they don't want to? Like, they say, okay, you know what, I canceled it. Well, what can you do? Can you force them into getting content insurance?
My understanding is you can't. Just speaking to some property managers with the landlord tenant board, is you can't make tenant insurance mandatory. You can write it into a lease and kind of but you could also show them the advantages to having it, to saying, so hey, if we have a fire and you have to move out, you're going to be on your own for what you'd have to pay out of pocket beyond over and above what your rent would be. And if someone comes to the property, one of your guests or visitors, and they slip and fall, you could be named in a lawsuit for $1 million, $2 million. So you can, and a broker can help you with that, because typically they can provide tenants insurance as well. So you can say, hey, I have someone who can take care of you. It's typically inexpensive, maybe $20 to $30 a month, depending on what kind of coverage you're looking for. But it's typically should be part of a good lease agreement. As we said, you can't make it mandatory, but you can show them the advantages of having it. And once a year, you can always request proof of that, and the broker should be able to provide you proof of that as well.
Okay, perfect. I was going to say, let's say you have a home where you, in the first year of purchase, you replace the furnace, new roof,
right,
and you do some waterproofing.
Yep.
Would that be would it be beneficial to you to share that information with the insurance company, so that potentially they might readjust your policy?
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime you do any changes to the property, whether it's upgrading something, renovating something, or doing any sort of what we call water mitigation practice in place, pass it on to your broker. There may not be a discount, or there may be a discount. What we're finding is a lot of the companies, they like the newer homes. They're built efficiently. They're being proactive. They're installing backflow valves. They're waterproofing the basement. Some companies offer discounts, some don't. Some will offer you lower deductibles if you have those things in place, which could in turn bring the premium down,
right?
Even though there's not a formal discount for it. But definitely pass that on to your broker or whoever you deal with for your insurance, because there's typically no disadvantage to telling them that information.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you have any tips that you can share? Anything that comes to mind that might help somebody who's got a couple of rental properties?
Yeah. So definitely shop around. Not to pump my own tires, but we specialize in it, so we make it fairly easy compared to maybe another brokerage. And beyond that is every couple of years, maybe ask your broker to make sure you're getting the best rate. I don't think it's advantageous to shop around every year, because it can become a bit of a process. But definitely if you've been with the same company for 5, 7, 10 years, it might be worth your while to shop around.
Right. And then also, if you're with a company for that long, you should probably get your home, the value of your home on the policy reappraised, right?
Yeah. So what we do, built into our policies or built into our standard renewal process. There's inflation from anywhere to 1 to 3% applied automatically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say every 3 years you should have ask the broker to do a full valuation of the building, provide them with any updates, any upgrades. What happens is sometimes a lot of people finish a basement, things like that. They don't tell us. It doesn't change the occupancy, doesn't change the rental income. But as we discussed before, now the basement, you might need to bump up the sewer backup coverage, or just in general, you want to make sure your building's insured to the full value. There can be penalties if you're not insuring the building to full value.
Right. Okay. So any other tips?
No, I think that's it. Just deal with a professional, whether it's a broker or an agent or whoever you're dealing with. Just deal with someone who you're comfortable knows what they're talking about.
Yep. Sounds good. All right, let's jump into the next section, which is the random 5.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you 5 random questions, as you know, because you've heard some of the other episodes.
Yes.
And I'll start off by, well, I actually kind of ask this, but we'll see if you can come up with a different answer.
Okay.
A bit of a challenge. What's one thing investors should look out for when getting property insurance?
So I would say the biggest thing, and what I see when I'm comparing competitors' quotes to mine, is the coverage form even we find. So you want to look for a comprehensive form or a broad form, which is basically going to cover everything that's not excluded. That's sudden and accidental loss. What I find is sometimes a broker that maybe doesn't do a lot of properties, they're doing the best they can, but the property's on what we refer to in our world as named perils form. So it's much more limiting. So they say, hey, I got a good deal. I'm $250 cheaper than you. Everything looks the same, but it's no fault to the broker. They just don't deal with it a lot, so maybe they think that this is the best they can find. But just coverage form and exclusions would be the biggest thing to look out for. Okay.
That's good. That's something that you would do, obviously.
Yeah.
Most people probably don't know what to look for.
Exactly. And even brokers, and it's to no fault of their own, but they just don't do it a lot, so they just don't know what best-in-class coverage is for that type of policy or insurance.
Okay. Number 2, what'd you do on your first date with your wife?
First date, we actually went to the movies. It's now a Marshall's, so the movie theater doesn't exist, so it's not like we can go back there and reminisce. Yeah. And we did dinner at Boston Pizza. So
Movie and dinner. I
just got my license, so I felt like a big shot in my mom's car and going out for dinner.
So about 10 years ago?
Yeah, 14 years ago now, I guess.
Years.
Yeah, 13, 14 years ago, yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. Would you prefer 2 main entrees or 1 main and a dessert?
I'm a big food guy, so 2 main entrees is sounds good to me.
So no dessert. 2 main entrees, no dessert.
Yeah, I like the desserts can be limiting to me. I don't eat dairy, so typically it's ice cream or there's dairy involved. So I'll take the 2 main entrees and skip dessert.
All right, good answer. Would you drink coffee or tea? What would you prefer?
I like coffee, big coffee guy. So drink
a
few cups a day for sure.
All right. And what would you do if you weren't an insurance broker?
That's an interesting question, and I always like the answers that people give on your podcast. And I think depending on, if I wasn't an insurance broker, real estate is super interesting to me, and I think that's maybe what draws me to it as an insurance professional. It still allows me to do insurance and be involved with all these great people in the industry.
Yeah.
So maybe a real estate agent, or maybe I always find like caddies in golf like the coolest thing. They're out there with all the pros, and seems to be a pretty interesting
cool
career. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. So that's it. Do you want to just quickly tell people how they can reach you and what services? Well, that's pretty obvious what services you can provide. But yeah. So we have the website studentrentalinsurance.ca. We also have rentalpropertyins.com for more generic rental property needs. Beyond that, acumeninsurance.com. My information's on there. Feel free to reach out with even just questions. More than happy to talk to anyone and give them some professional advice. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for having me. All right. We'll stay in touch.